Hi, my name is Netanel Saso, and I'm sitting with Omer Kaplan, and we're currently in your solo show in Studio 18, curated by James Lattanzio. And today we wanted to just talk a little bit about your work, why you're photographing in New York, and a bit about your family history, your upbringing, and learn more about you and the artwork that you make. And the way we met was really special. We both met through Israeli Artist Project, which is an organization in New York City that uplifts Israelis working and living in New York. The work that they show often connects to musicians, comedians, visual artists, actors, and they help put on productions for different artists. And so I got the opportunity to curate a group show, and I really loved the work that Omer put in, specifically the photograph that's also hanging in this show, Kippy Wedgwood, 1948, which showcases your grandfather in the army and also has elements of mixed media on top that you went ahead and added later on. And I felt like it really connected to me because I was doing a lot of work as well about my grandfather and my grandmother and uncovering kind of like the history that, you know, what they were living through and going through in Israel around 1948 and beyond. So I felt like they worked really well together, and I really love black and white photography as well. So I really connected to the work in that way. And I guess we can get started.
Yeah.
If there's anything you want to share to begin with.
Yeah, maybe I'll start by talking a little bit about this piece you mentioned, because it's kind of a funny story actually, because I started digging into my archive about 2 years ago, and all of a sudden I saw a lot of written material about my grandfather in different books. And even last year when we went to Israel, I went to his there's a Hapala museum in Haifa where my grandfather used to live at the time. So basically, he was part of the operation rescuing one of the ships that sank in the ocean, and he brought it out back to Haifa, and then they created a museum inside this ship. So last year, I took my partner and we went there to learn more about our family history, as well as specific, stories and how he brought Holocaust survivors, and a little bit about the history as well. So the funny story is that actually while I was looking at all these photographs and working with collage and things like that, I really felt very connected to this specific photograph because I kind of saw myself in there because of my background in the military. So, right, like immediately I felt like a very great connection to it. And as I kind of started to work more on it, and after I put together the collage work and scanned it, something didn't feel quite right to me. So I showed it to my dad and to just talk about it a little bit, because I found some information online, but I wanted to complete the picture. So I asked my dad, and funny enough, actually, before I talked to my dad, James pointed out that one person in the photo looks very much like me in it. So then I talked to my dad about it, trying to figure out who these people were. And then I learned that all this time I was thinking that my grandfather was in this photo, but in fact it was the artillery team of his ship, but he wasn't in the photo. So it was so funny to see the connection, the personal connection I felt to this photograph while thinking it's my grandfather in it, but then later on discovering it's not even him. So yeah, it was just a funny, very funny situation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
And yeah, just to add on to that, I think I also, around this time or even a little bit before, I started going to different thrift stores and kind of collect a lot of photographs I found of American soldiers, because I was trying to sort of see how I can fit within that reality as well. So I started to play with collage and trying to embed myself in these photographs and create alternative realities where everyone kind of surf together and see how I can even fit with such a foreign narrative. So this was kind of how I started experimenting with collage in relation to this work. Yeah.
You still felt the need to like showcase this image even though he wasn't in it and add to it. Can you talk a bit more about that?
So I think it's a very important question, and I think I still feel a very strong connection to the photograph, although my grandfather is not in it. First, because it still tells the story behind this specific sheep and the history of it in relation to my grandfather, of course, but also because everyone in Israel has to serve at the IDF. So I think in a way, when I look at this image, although I know it's not me in it, but I can very much put myself in it as if I was there, because we all share very similar experiences, and especially I kind of manipulated it into my own perception of what happened at the time and, you know, my memories of the military. So I guess this is why I still feel very connected to it.
Yeah, and I wonder if it like you said, it brings you closer to your grandfather, because maybe after you spent time in the military, you could go back and connect with his service even more. Are there ways that, like after going through the IDF, you felt a certain deeper connection to him?
So funny enough, I feel like we kind of grew up under this idea of our grandfather was a top officer for what was at the time the Navy in Israel. Yeah, so I grew up with this idea of having someone like my grandfather who was a top officer in a palace. So my cousin served in the same unit as my grandfather, and he became an officer. So I kind of felt like there was always a pressure for me to kind of find a meaningful job in the military. But I chose my own path, and I think my family was very much, they really accepted it. So there was not really a specific pressure to serve in this specific unit, but I think the only time when I started to become more and more interested of it is when I started to think about my past experiences in the military. So when I was there, I was too overwhelmed by my own personal experience and what was happening to me and my body at the time and my injuries and stuff like that, that I didn't even have the chance to really think about my grandfather, especially because he wasn't even alive.
And can you talk a bit more about your upbringing in Israel, like where you were from specifically and what the terrain looks like for someone who has never been?
Yeah, I think it's also an interesting point because we kind of grew up moving to a lot of different places when I was a kid. So I was born in a hospital in Jerusalem, but then we, for most of my childhood, we spent it in Herzliya. And later on, we moved to Ramat Aviv, which was near Tel Aviv, still near Tel Aviv. And then after that, we moved to a small town called Tel Mond. And 4 years ago, my mom even became the mayor of the city. So now we have like a very strong connection to it. I was always the oldest brother, you know, so I felt the need to kind of teach them everything I know and invest most of my time in them. And, you know, it also created some difficult situations because, you know, as someone who struggles, for instance, in high school and all of that, then I'm sure that my brother, they kind of saw it as some sort of like challenging time for them because, and also for me, because they were very good students. And for me, high school was an awful experience. So I kind of grew up with this sort of like tensions and everything around me. So around that time, I basically started to spend more and more time in my bedroom because I was trying to isolate myself from everyone else. And this is pretty much when I started to play with self-portraiture. So I would document myself, in these difficult times and trying to digest everything and think about my emotions and try to connect to myself through documenting myself as I was going through all of this. Mm-hmm.
So when that was happening, did you have access to a camera, or how are you documenting at that point in time?
So I remember from my bar mitzvah, actually, I used the money that I received from the event or whatever, because in Israel people give you checks, not like here you get presents. But so I took that money and I bought my first like point and shoot. It was like a Canon, whatever, small camera. So this is kind of how everything started, and I grew up at the same time with an uncle who was a very like analog photographer, black and white. He used to develop his negatives and work a lot in the darkroom. So I would spend the nights staying in his place in Jerusalem, and he was also a sculptor, so photographing his sculptures and all of that. And he would start teaching me how to use different lights, and we would just set up this imaginary worlds with his sculptures. And he used to collect a lot of miniatures and like small tiny furnitures, like tables for the sculptures and stuff like that. And I would basically play with them almost like an art therapy, and just photographing everything. So this is kind of how I started with photography.
I have this question, maybe from childhood, like you can go back and kind of think about the colors and like just kind of terrain or like that you were around, like if that had any effect on the art you make.
Yes.
Like the landscape.
Yeah, makes sense. Yes, as I mentioned, I kind of grew up in the suburbs, basically. So it was a very small town at the time. Now it's a lot bigger, but it was very social and everyone knew each other. And I feel that played a very important part in my life, because we kind of go up playing with the neighbors' kids and spending a lot of time in nature around our area, walking on different hikes, riding the bicycle everywhere. But also a little bit later on, I started camping a lot. So I used to spend a lot of time in the desert or the Dead Sea area. So I think whenever I'm back in Israel, I still go to these places and I try to recapture them in new ways, and sort of like start to like rethink about how I remember everything. So I think something about the landscape, specifically in the desert, and really works well with the work I'm making, because the way I see it, it has so much to do with like surrealism and how this landscape can sort of like affect how you feel almost when you're there, and when you look at all the textures and like the sand and like the dunes and like all the mountains. So I think I still find myself thinking about it almost like every day. So you can see some of it in my work as you look through the exhibition.
There's an image that stands out when you walk in the space where it's you, I believe it's you lying down in the nude on sand, like a mound of sand. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think when I was a student back in Israel in Tel Aviv, I studied photography, and during this year, I kept thinking about how I can create images that are not too straightforward, but more subtle and have more hidden meanings to them. So instead of sort of like giving the work as a final statement, maybe raising questions instead, or finding ways that are less straightforward but more impactful to convey different messages. So I think I kept thinking about this image for many years, and I remember trying different versions of it even back home in Israel. And then when I created this one that we see in the show, I was still a student at ICP. And I remember I went there at 11 p.m. just by myself. I went to the beach. I had a large format camera. I was very excited to do it. I felt like I'm doing something important. It felt like a little journey to the beach. And it's very much connected to the time when I was a teenager, because I used to just stay up until late and just usually drink a lot and walk and try to get to the beach from where I used to live. But the beach was too far away, so I was never able to finish the journey. So when I did it again here in New York, it felt kind of almost like the same experience. But basically, when I came back after this shoot, the negative was completely blank, so I couldn't do it. So I had to do it again. And this is where it really came together. I started digging the hole again and putting myself in there. I had a friend who helped me capturing the photo, so I can focus mostly on how I feel, kind of like laying there in the cold sand. I still remember how it felt on my skin. So I think that was a very important point in my journey. I think this specific photo.
Why you had to be face down? Like what? Why that laying down is very specific.
Oh.
It's not because usually you see images of photography. I feel like a majority of it, like when you're thinking about portraiture, is frontal. So when you see something where you don't even see your face in it, it's like you're in the ground. What are you trying to convey?
So at the time, I think I was also looking at Anna Mendieta, and I think I saw a lot of her work while she sort of like puts herself in different landscapes and shows what's left after she was there oftentimes, or embedding her body in the landscape. So I was probably subconsciously thinking about her work in relation to mine and the performative aspects of it. But also at the time, most of my work was around my body and the pain I was having in my body. So I think the act of sort of like burying yourself is almost like an act of escapism, where you try to, like escape the reality and how you feel. So in a way, I felt like digging the hole for myself was an act of performance, right? So it wasn't as much about it wasn't really about the actual photo, but almost about the actual experience digging that hole and putting my head in it, almost like that's the bottom of the bottom, like there's nowhere else to go. So I think that's kind of it. And also there's some elements in my work that I consider a little provocative. So I think in a way, being naked at the beach is another kind of act of, it's almost like a provocation, right? Because people walk by on the boardwalk, they probably see something that almost looks like a dead body. So maybe people were thinking, what's going on there? And this is some sort of like weird feelings I'm trying to evoke for my audience, or for people that's kind of like that are present when I take these photos, when I make these pictures. Yeah.
Do you feel, no, I love this. And do you feel in Israel that it's more, because I have experience kind of up in the north where people are more open, like with their body, and they even go on trips where they go to different bodies of water, and they're all nude, and they allow themselves to just like enjoy the water, and they still like talk, like, they're hanging out. But do you feel like in America that's less so, or like in Israel that you see more often, like people barefoot or more in touch with their body?
Yeah, actually, wow, it's a very good point, because I grew up not wearing shoes. I used to walk everywhere kind of barefoot. I used to also visit my friend who at the time lived in a kibbutz, so we would just hang out. And yeah, nature was a big part of it, and how we feel in nature and our physical connection to it and how we feel the landscape we're in. So I think in New York, because it's considered an urban jungle, I find myself oftentimes, I miss it a lot. And I think escaping to the beach was an interesting experience for me, because I was trying to go back to the same feelings I had back home. So for sure, there's more openness to, I guess, body expression in a way, and like maybe even body image in Israel, maybe compared to the US, because I feel like here there are less maybe spaces that kind of act this way, you know.
Right.
So. Mhm.
And I question, when you were younger, as kind of growing up, was it embedded in you to be a fighter and to be like, grow up and like be a man and be strong? You can't cry, or like you have to go to the army. You knew that that was going to be a point in time you have to go. Like, were you able to be more in touch with this feminine side, or allow yourself to do the photos you do today? Like, did that happen? Was there a point in time that happened later on, or were you brought up, more strict way?
So I think during my training, it was about 3 months or so. That was the most difficult time, because there was a sense of this masculinity in super masculine environment, and a sense of competition, and there was a lot of social peer pressure too, because we used to do different activities together and take different physical exams and stuff like that. So we spent a lot of time together, and it was a somewhat toxic environment and not so healthy. So at the time, I couldn't find really the capacity to express myself in the same way that I do now. But then later on, after the training, I think I started writing on my phone, like a journal, almost every night. So this is when I started to feel this connection again to my heritage, and my grandmother was a poet. So I started writing almost every day, again, as an act of sort of like as an outlet for all these feelings, and to express this panic attacks I used to have at the time. So yeah, I think in that sense, this is really when I started to feel like I'm finally able to express myself again, and I have the capacity to do it. Because in the military, you find yourself sleeping probably with 8 more people in your room on bunk beds, So when I was writing all about those panic attacks, I was like, laying like that in my bed and trying to make sure no one can see me while I'm typing everything. And, there was a lot of things that I had to hide back then. Yeah.
There's a lot of moments in the show where your work feels very vulnerable, but it's very emotional, but then there's also a level of whimsy and playfulness that you bring. And I heard you're really connected to Dadaism and Surrealism. And so there's a specific piece I really like in the show. It's a very large portrait of you, and there's like flowers covering your genitalia, and then a big, maybe foil sheet. And I was wondering if you could speak more about how that plays through that image, and like the themes that you're trying to bring out, and maybe what that sheet is actually.
Yeah, so I think this image is probably the oldest one I took in this show, the oldest photograph I made. I made it around 2016, I believe, when I was a student, but also right after my service in the military. So at the time when I explored self-portraits, I started playing with some medical equipment I got from my paramedic, who was a very good friend of mine, and we spent a lot of time together in base. So she gave me these thermal blankets, and then I became fascinated by the way they look, how they reflect light, and how they feel on your body. The act of covering yourself in something that's supposed to provide some sense of comfort, or even help people with hypothermia, for instance. So now when I'm thinking about it, I also remember a few instances during training when we were in the field in the desert and it was very, very cold, and I almost got hypothermia. Like I almost got it because I were standing outside waiting for the commander or something like that. And I remember one of the paramedics dragging me inside the jeep they had nearby, and they started, hitting the car, and I felt like extremely cold. And for some reason, they didn't have those thermal blankets, but I guess in a way that experience kind of influenced the way I oftentimes choose to portray myself in the pictures. When you find yourself at risk, at a potential of losing consciousness or some things like that, I think you seek for support, you seek for a sense of comfort, and something about putting a blanket on top of you can actually provide that sense of comfort that I was probably looking for at the time. So I think as I was actually documenting myself and taking the self-portraits during the anxiety or panic attacks I had, I also found shelter not just in my bedroom, but I would also go to the bathroom, and I started taking photos. I started putting my camera on, my tripod, and facing pointing it at myself. And I think I was just playing around with objects I found in the shower, and something about these flowers was sort of like so plasticky and fake that I felt like I just love this sense of being vulnerable on one hand, but also showing something that feels so artificial in a way, and to not necessarily share everything right away, but almost using this object as another element within the enigma that I ask the audience sometimes maybe to solve for themselves or for me, but also using these objects to sort of like integrate a sense of play, a sense of a performance.
So with this image, like there is more play and like kind of things are happening more quickly, but then you have a series of work. It's called The Space Between, where you photograph yourself in hotel rooms. And so in those photographs, first, if you could speak about this series of work and what inspired it, but then also talk about how maybe you shy away from adding more playful elements in these works? Is it different, or are you bringing like the Dadaism inspiration into it in a different way?
Yeah, I think I started with this series kind of not thinking about it too much. So I didn't plan on having a series that explores these themes, but all of a sudden I started digging again through my archive, and I started to collect all these images. And then I remembered that I used to go to different hotels for work, even if it wasn't necessarily for photography, but even when I used to work at a production company and we would just stay at a hotel before setting up an event for a company, then I would still have my camera with me and kind of find myself in this weird places, trying to grasp where I was and how my body fits in these spaces. So at the time when I started, I didn't think about it that much, but then the more I started to do it more often, and I found myself going to Vegas for a job, and we stayed at a very beautiful hotel. And at the time I was doing lighting for another photographer. So they asked me to put all the gear and the lights in my room in the hotel. And I thought, oh, wow, that's a great opportunity. I have all this gear with me. I got to do something with it. So I started setting up like, like an 8x8 silk and like continuous lights and stuff like that. And then I found myself almost directing movie about myself, which was kind of weird because it started, I think, I didn't even have a camera, I think, with me. So I just put my laptop and I used the built-in camera to record myself while I was doing different almost like dances or movements and stuff like that. So I think this is where it got super performative, and I think performance and Dadaism kind of work together in the work I try to make, because I think Dadaism really opened up the idea for me that art can be an act of liberation. It can be an active act of liberation, meaning you have to work towards it to make it more liberating. And I think before then I was very much strict with my photography, thinking about Robert Mapplethorpe, photographers like that who were very technical with their lighting, with their framing and everything. And after learning more about Dadaism, it felt like I'm a little bit bored by photography as a medium, and I'm trying to break its boundaries and see what I can do with it. So I think this is where Dadaism came into play, especially with this work.
In the show, there's a video, performative video, and I find that it ties together a lot of the work that you have curated, the photographs. And can you speak more about this video? And I guess there's a point, an image that really sticks in my mind that I go back to, where you have stills that you've animated, and it's your arm, and you're using your arm almost like a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with everything we've talked about, like, connection to Israel and your time in the military, like you can feel it all in that video, like the pain, the trauma. So maybe, if you want to share what it was like making it.
At the time when I worked on this piece, I was very inspired by Chris Marker, the filmmaker. And I think specifically with his work called La Jetée. So he was able to put together a sequence of still images into a form of a film. And I was fascinated by it because I also went to an amazing show by Duane Michaels at the Morgan Library, which was also exploring, the unconsciousness, playfulness, creating narratives within contact sheets or different collages and different sequences of images he put together along with writings on the images. So I think at the time, this is what I was kind of constantly thinking about because I was very inspired by it. And I think specifically with this body of work, I started it during COVID. So in a way, I learned when I was putting together this show, I learned that every single body of work is sort of connected to the other one. Mm-hmm. Because in a way, with the COVID series, this video, I basically started to explore themes of masculinity, sexuality, a sense of isolation. I was just by myself, during COVID. I think everyone felt this way. So I think I was, again, pointing the camera at me towards how I was feeling at the time. But instead also, for the first time, maybe even validating my sexuality in a way. So the act of, the hands is also an opportunity to look at pain in relation to the body. And I think I was also trying to give it some attention and think about it in relation to the pain I was having during my time in the military. So all of a sudden you start seeing components that can feel very violent too, like the whip or the gun or things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're using like erotic elements to connect to like military pain. I think like that's something I guess I haven't really seen before. Like it's very heartbreaking, like for especially young men to kind of go through that, and then I guess seeing it now, does it help, like it helps you kind of heal by doing this work?
Yeah, I think until I started talking about it so openly, I wasn't aware that, maybe I'm not the only one dealing with it. Maybe there are more people that feel the need to express themselves in this way. And it's a fine line, because I feel like as a heterosexual man, I feel like I didn't see much of this work back then, because there was a lot of shame around it, I think. So in a way, perhaps it was the same shame and need to hide things that I felt when I was, again, in this bedroom in the military with 8 more people, and I couldn't really, express myself almost in the same sense. So I think the shame was always there in my journey, but kind of took different forms. So I think maybe this is the connection between this body of work, the videos, and the need to almost validate your sexuality and putting it out there again in a provocative way, compared to back then, when I couldn't really find the right outlet for my emotions that were so present and intense back then.
It's like, I don't know if you're willing to answer this. You're helping me kind of go through it, but like making work that is connected to Israel, like now, and then like, how does it feel? Like, it's a whole new level of pain to go through, and how people perceive it, and how is it going to change the work, because now people will come in here and see another element that maybe they weren't thinking of before. Like, it's, I don't know, we're seeing it in the news every day. Like, does it have an effect on the work, or like, does it make you just want to make even more work?
This is such a good question, because when the war started, I didn't make a lot of work at all. I felt like I can't express myself. I didn't want to say something that might be insulting to some people, and I didn't want to share my own opinions. And I think after a year or so, I felt like it's okay to make the work without thinking about it too much, and just sort of save it for later when the time feels right. Because oftentimes with my work, I feel like I start, like for instance, with a space between, I started working on it when I was probably around the age of 17 or 18. So, and now it's the first time I show this body of work. So I think in a way, time plays an important part within the work I make. Photography is very much intertwined with the sense of time and how people perceive the work, in the future. So I think in a way, I'm always more interested in showing the work in that context. Like, I wanted to become all of a sudden a reflection of the past. So I think for me, it's just about when is the right time to come out with the work and feel comfortable about sharing it. But right now, it's too soon for me to even start, working with all this new situation and traumas and emotions and images that we've never seen before, that now we had to face and see in the news all the time. So I think, in a way, for me, it doesn't feel like it's the right time to touch it. And I think for me, it feels too early, I think. I just wanted to thank everyone for putting this show together. I want to thank James for curating the show and for his generosity and being super helpful with putting everything together and providing the space. And to Netanel, who joined us towards the end for this gallery talk. I love your insights, and it's amazing to see your reflection on the work. And, you know, the conversations we were having while preparing for this talk meant a lot to me. And I think I learned a lot about you and myself, and it felt amazing. And thank you, everyone, for coming to see the show.